Assalamu alaikum. I am Dr.Md.Misbahul. Today I will discuss about the structure of the skin. Uh, Here, this is a 3D model of a cut section of the skin representing different layers of skin and different structures. First of all, the outermost part of the skin is the superficial layers of the epidermis. The stratum granulosum or granular layer of epidermis is the layer of the epidermis between the stratum lucidum and stratum spinosum, which consists of cells containing keratohyalin granules. The stratum lucidum or clear layer of epidermis is the translucent layer of the epidermis just beneath the stratum corneum, particularly noticeable in the thick skin of the palm and soles. The stratum corneum or horny layer is the outermost layer of the epidermis, consisting of cells that are dead and desquamating. The superficial layers of the epidermis, as we see here, representing the green structure indicating the superficial layer of the epidermis. It is composed of stratum corneum, stratum lucidum, and stratum granulosum. The stratum corneum is composed of about 20 layers of flattened or squamous, highly keratinized cells and cells in the layer lack of desmosomes. Thus, the cells easily dissociate and desquamate from the skin surface. The stratum lucidum is only present in thick skin, the plantar and palmar skin. It appears as a translucent layer of about 5 rows of squamous cells, and the stratum granulosum consists of 1 to 5 layers of flattened polygonal granulated cells. It is so called and it contains granules of filaggrin that cross links with keratin. Keratinocytes in the upper layer of the stratum granulosum also contain lamellar bodies rich in glycolipids. The cells discharge this lipid-rich substance into the intracellular spaces via exocytosis, thus forming the major epidermal permeability barrier of the skin. The function of the epidermis is continuously renewing its epithelial layers. This ensures that the epidermis acts as the body's first line of defense, acting as a barrier against environmental hazards such as physical, chemical, biochemical, and immunological threats. Now, the second layer of the skin is the deep layers of the epidermis. The stratum basale or basal layer of epidermis is the deepest layer of the epidermis beneath the stratum spinosum, composed of a single layer of cells including stem cells, melanocytes, and Merkel cells. The stratum spinosum or spinous layer is the layer of the epidermis between the stratum granulosum and stratum basale. It contains the Pickel cells. The deep layers of the epidermis are composed of the stratum spinosum and stratum basale. This is the deepest layer of the epidermis. The stratum spinosum is the thickest layer of the epidermis. It contains several layers of polyhedral keratinocytes, but cells at the most superficial surface of this layer are flattened. The process of adjacent keratinocytes are connected by desmosomes, which adds to the strength of this layer. The stratum spinosum also contains Langerhans cells or antigen-presenting dendritic cells. They play an important role in initiating immune response against foreign antigens. The stratum basale is the deepest layer of the epidermis. It is composed of a single layer of cuboidal columnar keratinocytes that are firmly attached to a basement membrane. Keratinocytes of the stratum basale are continuously proliferating from a stem cell population and are pushed into the overlying stratum spinosum. A number of other cell populations are found in the stratum basale, including melanocytes and Merkel cells. Melanocytes are responsible for producing melanin, a pigment that accumulated in melanosomes released from the melanocytes. Keratinocytes take up these melanosomes via phagocytosis, thus releasing the melanin to the cytoplasm of the keratinocytes. Melanin protects the DNA of cells by absorbing ultraviolet or UV rays. Skin exposed to UV rays stimulates the production of melanin and accelerates its transfer to keratinocytes. Merkel cells are the tactile cells of the skin. They act as melanoreceptors and play a role in sensory perception. Now, the the third layer of the skin is the papillary and reticular layer of dermis. The papillary layer is the outer layer of the dermis characterized by ridges or papillae protruding into the epidermis and by greater cellularity and vascularization than the reticular layer of the dermis. The reticular layer is the inner layer of the dermis consisting chiefly of dense irregular fibrous connective tissue. The dermis can be subdivided into two distinct layers. The superficial layer is the papillary layer and a deep layer called the reticular layer. The papillary layer is a thin layer of loose connective tissue found beneath the epidermis. This part of the dermis contributes to the dermal papillae that extend and interdigitate with the epidermal ridges. It is composed of collagen type 3 and elastic fibers that contain loops of capillaries supplying blood to the avascular epidermis and to regulate temperature. The reticular layer of the dermis forms the deepest layer of the dermis. It is much thicker than the papillary layer, yet there is no distinct boundary between the two layers. The reticular layer contains dense irregular connective tissue of mostly collagen type 1 fibers with interspersing elastic fibers. The reticular layer is also continuous with the underlying hypodermis or subcutaneous tissue. A deep plexus of large blood vessels lies at the border between the reticular layer of the dermis and the hypodermis. It supplies numerous branches of capillaries to the papillary layers. The papillary layer of the dermis contains loops of capillaries supplying blood to the avascular epidermis. Thus, capillaries extend into the dermal papillae, supplying a rich, nutritive vasculature to just below the epidermis. In addition, this vasculature acts as a thermoregulator in cold conditions, but blood flow is decreased in the papillary layer to minimize heat loss from the body, while body flow is increased in the papillary layer in hot conditions. Lymphatic afferent vessels arise at the dermal papillae and coverage forming plexuses adjacent to the blood vessels. The dermis is also richly innervated with a network of sensory afferent nerves extending from the papillary dermis, ending at epidermal and dermal receptors. Other structures found in the dermis include hair follicles. This is the hair follicles. This is the hair follicles. See, this is the hair follicle. This is the hair follicle. Sweat glands. This is the sweat gland. This is the sweat. This is the sweat gland. And this is the sebaceous gland. Blood vessels, lymph vessels, nerves, and sensory receptors. Recent studies have suggested that the tissue arrangement of dermis is not a densely packed wall-like structure commonly seen in alcohol-fixed tissue. In fact, it is composed of a collagen lattice surrounded by fluid-filled interstitial spaces. The interstitium, this fluid-filled interstitial spaces is called the interstitium. The fluid has been described as pre-lymph, where it is collected by lymph capillaries to form lymph. This is also described in other tissues such as lung, renal blood vessel, adventitia, and fascia. Function: the dermis has a number of key roles. Firstly, it acts as a support for the epidermis and hypodermis. Its elastic fibers give the skin elasticity and pliability. As the dermis contains rich blood supply, it provides the avascular epidermis with nourishment. In addition, this vasculature acts as a thermoregulator. In cold conditions, blood flow is decreased in the papillary layer to minimize heat lost from the body, while blood flow is increased in the papillary layer in hot conditions. The interstitium present in the dermis may serve as a shock absorber due to the constant distension and compression of the skin, and may also play a role in pathogenesis such as edema. Now, the most lowest part of the skin is the subcutaneous tissue. The subcutaneous tissue is the layer of loose connective tissue situated just beneath the skin. Structure and morphology: the subcutaneous tissue or superficial fascia or hypodermis is located beneath the reticular layer of the dermis. It is composed of loose irregular connective tissue containing adipose tissue. The amount of adipose tissue depends on various aspects such as the location in the body, sex of the individual, and the nutrition of the individual. There is no adipose tissue in the subcutaneous portions of the eyelids, clitoris, or penis. The subcutaneous tissue contains an extensive network of blood vessels. These are important for the rapid uptake of drugs delivered by hypodermal injections, such as insulin. Functions of dermis. Functions of subcutaneous tissue. The subcutaneous tissue acts as a thermal insulator, as a storage of energy, and as a shock absorber. It loosely attaches to underlying deep fascia, aponeurosis, and periosteum, thus allowing skin to guide over these underlying structures. Now, see the different structures of the skin. This is the superficial layer of the epidermis. This is the deep layers of the epidermis. Look very carefully. This is the deep layer of the epidermis. This is the deep layer of the epidermis. This is the papillary and reticular layers of dermis. This is the papillary, upper portion papillary layer of dermis, and below this is the reticular layer of dermis. Beneath the reticular layer of dermis there is subcutaneous tissue. In the papillary and reticular layers of dermis there are several structures. As we see here is the hair follicle. This is the hair follicle. Look very carefully. This is the hair follicle. If we go inside the skin, this is the hair follicle. This is the hair follicle. This muscle is the arrector muscle of hair. The arrector pili muscle is a type of tiny smooth muscle of the skin whose contraction causes the hair to stand erect with cutis anserina or goose flesh. Origin of the arrector pili muscle, papillary layer of the dermis. So the arrector pili muscle is arises from the papillary layer of dermis and inserts in a hair follicle. Innervation: it is innervated mainly by sympathetic nerve. It elevates a hair on the skin. The arrector muscles of the hair or arrector pili are formed by bundles of closely packed smooth muscle cells. Thus, muscle extends obliquely, attaching to the hair follicle to the papillary layer of the dermis. At the hair follicle, the erectropili muscle is attached to bulged region in the connective tissue sheath via elastin fibrils. A sebaceous gland sits at the angle between the muscle and the hair follicle. Erectropili muscles are absent from the hairs of the face, axilla, pubis, eyelashes, eyebrows, nostrils, and external auditory meatus. Functions of erectropili muscle. When the erectropili muscle contracts, it pulls the hair. It also elevates the epidermis where the hair enters and depresses the epidermis where the muscle attaches at the papillary layer of the dermis, thus forming small hillocks known as goosebumps. In addition, because of the relationship between the erectropili muscle and the sebaceous gland at the hair follicle, its contraction aids the expulsion of the gland's contents. Now, another structure we see in the papillary and reticular layers of dermis is the sebaceous gland. A sebaceous gland is one of the holocrine glands of the skin that are located in the dermis and secrete sebum. This is the sebaceous gland. The sebaceous glands are small saccular structures that are found in the dermis. Sebaceous glands are usually associated with the hair follicle and erectropili muscle, which together form the pilosebaceous unit. The gland has a short, white duct that connects the gland to the isthmus of the hair follicle. Epithelium of the gland, which are arranged into acini, produce and accumulate sebum that drains into the papillary canal. The uppermost part of the hair follicle, located between the isthmus and opening at the epidermis, and moves towards the surface of the epidermis. The sebaceous gland sits at the angle between the erectropili muscle and the hair follicle. Thus, the muscle can assist the gland with the expulsion of its contents. However, sebaceous glands are not always associated with the hair follicle. Instead, their ducts open directly as the epidermal surfaces. For example, the leaves, areola of the breast, penis, clitoris, and labia minora. Functions of sebaceous glands. What is the function of sebaceous glands? Sebum plays an important role in the epidermal barrier and acts as a component of the skin's immune system. This is the sebaceous gland. Look closely. This is the sebaceous gland. If we go inside the skin, we can see this is the sebaceous gland from inside of the skin. This is the erectropili muscle. This is the erectropili muscle. This is the this is the hair fibrous sheath. This is the hair shaft, and this is the sebaceous gland. Now, the next structure is the this is the bulbous corpuscle or ruffini. Ruffini bulbous corpuscle are type of a lamellated corpuscle in the dermis that is a slowly adapting receptor for sensations of continuous pressure. Bulbous corpuscles are slow adapting mechanoreceptors found in the reticular layer of the dermis and are especially common on the plantar skin or soles of the feet. They are highly branched nerve endings that are unmyelinated and traverse between bundles of collagen fibers. Ruffini bulbous corpuscles are located deeper in the dermis than the Krauss bulbous corpuscles. Function. Bulbous corpuscles act as stretch receptors in the dermis. They are also believed to be sensitive to heat. Then the next structure is the this is the nerves of the skin, and This structure is the nerves of the skin. This structure is the apocrine sweat gland. An apocrine gland is a type of large branched specialized sweat gland that empties into the upper portion of a hair follicle instead of directly onto the skin surfaces. Found only on certain areas of the body such as around the anus and in the axilla. After puberty, the gland produces a viscous, viscous secretion that is acted on by bacteria to produce a characteristic acrid odor. These sweat glands are misnamed as they use merocrine secretion. The skin hosts many types of glands such as sweat and sebaceous gland. Two types of sweat glands exist, namely the eccrine and apocrine sweat glands, and differ from each other in their size, histology, distribution, and function. The apocrine sweat glands develop from the hair follicle. Just above the opening of the sebaceous glands. The secretory portion of the gland is highly coiled. The secretory portion of the gland is highly coiled, tubular and widely dilated. From here, short ducts connect the secretory portion to the hair follicle, where it can secrete its contents. Apocrine sweat glands is composed of water, electrolytes, lipids, and steroids. Apocrine glands are not found in all skin and occur in regions such as the axilla or armpit, the mons pubis, the areola of the nipple, and the perianal region. These glands become functional at puberty. There are approximately 1 lakh apocrine glands over the surface of the adult body. The apocrine sweat is composed of water, electrolytes, lipids, and steroids and appears as a cloudy viscous secretion. Apocrine, apocrine glands are not found in all skin and occur in regions such as the axilla or armpit, the mons pubis, the areola of the nipple, and the perianal region. Sweating is an important function that regulated body temperature. The viscous watery sweat is secreted to the surface of the epidermis. As it evaporates, it dissipates thermal energy or heat from the skin, hence why humans sweat more after exercise or in hot temperatures. Then the next structure is the eccrine sweat glands. An eccrine gland is an ordinary or simple sweat gland. They are sweat glands of the merocrine type, unbranched, coiled tubular glands that are distributed over almost all of the body surface and promote cooling by evaporation of their secretion. The skin hosts many types of glands such as sweat and sebaceous glands. Two types of sweat glands exist, namely the eccrine and apocrine glands, and differ from each other in their size, histology, distribution, and function. Then the next structure is the This is the nerves of the skin. The skin is predominantly innervated by sensory nerve fibers that detect and respond to physical and chemical stimuli in the environment. Autonomic nerve fibers also innervate structures, including the eccrine and apocrine sweat glands, sebaceous glands, erector pili muscles, and arterioles. The integumentary system is predominantly innervated by sensory nerve fibers containing highly specialized sensory receptors that detect and respond to physical and chemical stimuli in the environment. The skin receives many stimuli from the external environment, such as touch, stretch, temperature changes, pain, and pressure. For this reason, it is important that the skin has appropriate sensory receptors responding to this stimuli. This sensory information is relayed to the central nervous system. Autonomic nerve fibers are also found in the skin. They innervate structures including the eccrine and apocrine sweat glands. Erector pili muscle, and arterioles. Autonomic input will induce functions like thermoregulation, such as the vasodilation and sweat production, and goosebumps brought about by contraction of the erector pili muscle. The nerves of the skin form a branching plexus in the deeper layers of the reticular dermis, where the sensory receptors of the deeper layers are found and innervate structures such as the hair follicle and glands. Smaller nerve fibers extend up through the dermis to the papillary layer, forming a papillary plexus, where a variety of sensory receptors are found. Sensory receptors such as the free nerve endings will terminate in the epidermis, but the majority of nerve fibers do not extend this superficially. Now, the next structure is the lamellar corpuscle. This is the lamellar corpuscle. This is also the lamellar corpuscle. This is the lamellar corpuscle from inside the skin. The lamellar corpuscle is a type of large ovoid rapidly adapting encapsulated nerve ending sensitive to pressure, touch, and vibration. The most complicated of the nerve endings, its core contains the normalated nerve terminal and its swan cells, surrounded by concentric layers of modified fibroblasts in cross section resembling a sliced onion. It is found in the skin and deeper tissue, particularly in the palms, soles, digits of hands and feet, joints, external genitalia, and breasts. Lamellar corpuscles or Pacinian corpuscles are the largest of the encapsulated sensory receptors. They are rapid responding mechanoreceptors. The corpuscles are more numerous in the palmar and plantar skin, but are also found in the arm, neck, and genitalia. The lamellar corpuscles are found deep in the reticular layer of the dermis and the hypodermis. They are usually oval in shape and can measure up to 2 mm in length. The capsule is formed by about 30 concentrically arranged layers of fat cells. In the center of the lamellae or the core is the unmyelinated axon. Function of lamellar corpuscles. Lamellar corpuscles are sensitive to high frequency vibrations such as grasping or releasing an object. Then the next structure we see here is the arteries of the skin. The skin contains a rich network of blood supply and lymph vessels in the dermis and hypodermis, that is subcutaneous tissue. There are two major plexuses, one located at the region of the dermis and subcutaneous tissues, and one in the superficial part of the dermis that supplies a large network of capillaries to the dermal papillae. Structure or morphology. The skin contains a rich network of blood and lymph vessels in the dermis and hypodermis. There are two major plexuses, one located at the region of the dermis and subcutaneous tissue, and one in the superficial part of the dermis that supplies a large network of capillaries to the dermal papillae. The function of these capillaries, these vessels supply nourishment to the three layers of the skin, the epidermis, dermis, and subcutaneous tissue. In addition, this vasculature acts as a thermoregulator. In cold conditions, blood flow is decreased in the papillary layer of the dermis to minimize heat lost from the body, while blood flow is increased in the papillary layer in hot conditions. Now, the next structure is the veins of the skin. The veins of the skin begin in the papillae of the skin from subpapillary plexuses and open into the subcutaneous veins. The skin contains a rich network of blood and lymph vessels in the dermis and hypodermis. And the next structure is the lymphatic vessels. This is the lymphatic vessels. A lymphatic vessel is a vessel that collects lymph from the tissues and through which the lymph passes to reach the bloodstream. These are the nerves of the skin. These are the peritracheal receptors. This is the peritracheal receptors. Peritracheal receptors are free nerve endings that end at the hair follicle. They are rapidly adapting mechanoreceptors and respond to hair movements. The nerve plexus of the hair follicle or peritracheal receptors is formed by a group of free nerve endings that terminate at the hair follicle. They are myelinated fibers and branch deep in the reticular layer of the dermis and are fast responding mechanoreceptors. The number and size of the branches of the nerves contributing to their hair root is related to the size of the follicle they innervate. Function: root hair nerve plexuses respond to the movement of hair when it becomes deformed. That is, bending and pulling of the hair. These fibers essentially give the hair a sensory role in the body. Now, this structure is the tactile corpuscles. A tactile corpuscle is a rapidly adapting encapsulated nerve ending found in the dermal ridges of glabrous skin, particularly of the digits, lips, nipples, and genitalia. It is specialized for tactile discrimination. Tactile corpuscles or Meissner corpuscles are fast adapting mechanoreceptors. These receptors are found mostly in the forearm, lips, and most condensed in thick hairless skin, particularly the finger pad. Tactile corpuscles are cylindrical in shape. And are found in the dermal papillae of the dermis. Each corpuscle is encapsulated in connective tissue with a central pore of fat swan cells stacked on top of each other. Function: the tactile corpuscles are sensitive to light touch and can easily detect the shape and texture of objects. Therefore, these corpuscles are the neural basis for reading braille text. As and the blind person uses the braille text, these corpuscles are the neural basis for reading braille text. Then the next structure is the eccrine sweat glands. This is the eccrine sweat glands. Now, these this is the subcutaneous tissue. This is the arteries of skin. This is the veins of skin. This is the apocrine sweat gland. This is the acrine sweat gland. This is the acrine sweat gland which opens in the epidermis. This is the hair shaft. The hair shaft is the long cylindrical part that is the major portion of hair, sometimes referring to only the portion that extends beyond the surface of the skin. The hair shaft is composed of three concentric layers, namely the outer cuticle, medial cortex, and inner medulla. They differ from each other in the types of keratin filaments they possess, cells in the hair matrix surrounding the dermal papillae and responsible for hair growth. The cuticle forms the outer surface of the hair shaft. It is made up of layers of overlapping keratinized squamous cells which resembles fish scales. The cuticle protects the hair from the physical and chemical damage. The cortex is the bulkiest layer of the hair shaft. The cortex is the bulkiest layer of the hair shaft. It is composed of elongated cells containing hard keratin, intermediate filaments, and may contain melanin contributing to the hair color. The medulla, which is absent in fine hair, is composed of loose aggregates of cells. These are the papilla. This structure is the papilla, and this structure is the epidermal ridges. These are the epidermal ridges, and this structure is the papilla. So what is it is? The epidermal ridges are the inward projections of the epidermis into the dermis at the dermal epidermal junction, as seen histology in vertical sections. The epidermis has many downward projections into the epidermis known as epidermal ridges. Likewise, the dermis has alternating upward projections between the epidermal ridges and dermal papillae. Below the epidermal ridges lies the dermoepidermal junction. This is an acellular zone between the dermis and the epidermis. The adhesion of the epidermis to the dermis is maintained at this junction by the interaction of hemidesmosome junctions and keratin filaments of the epidermis and collagen and anchoring fibrils of the dermis. Function: this organization of epidermal ridges and dermal papillae at the dermoepidermal border increases the surface area of contact between the dermis and epidermis, thus strengthening the connection of dermis and epidermis. Now, this is the papillae. Papillae is a small nipple-shaped projections, elevation or structure. Here they correspond to the spaces among the downward or inward projecting rete ridges on the undersurface of the epidermis. The dermis has many upward projections that extend into the epidermis known as dermal papillae. Likewise, the epidermis has alternating downward projections between the dermal papillae called the epidermal ridges. Above the papillae of the dermis lies the dermoepidermal junction. This is an acellular zone between the dermis and the epidermis. The adhesion of the epidermis to the dermis is maintained at this junction by the interaction of hemidesmosome junctions and keratin filaments of the epidermis and collagen and anchoring fibrils of the dermis. Function is the same as the epidermal ridges, As this organization of epidermal ridges and dermal papillae at the dermo-epidermal border increases the surface area of contact between the dermis and epidermis, thus strengthening the connection between the two layers. Now, the next structure is this is the bulbous corpuscle of Ruffini. This is the bulbous corpuscle of Ruffini. This is the apocrine sweat glands. This is the acrine sweat glands. This is the erector pili muscle. This is the hair follicle. This is the hair shaft. This is the superficial layer of epidermis. This is the deep layers of epidermis. This is the papillary and reticular layers of dermis, and this is the subcutaneous tissue. This is the Ruffini corpuscles. This is the bulbous corpuscle of Ruffini. This is the nerves of skin. This structure is the tactile meniscus. This is the tactile meniscus. This is the tactile corpuscle. This is the tactile meniscus, and this is the tactile corpuscle. So these are all about the structure of the skin you have to know. I hope this video will help you, and look carefully. This is the model of the skin. If this video will help you, I think it will be my success. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe my channel and do share this video to help others. Assalamu alaikum.